MAGA is a cult. In every cult, there is basically three bubbles. You have the authoritarian leader, the person who tells them what they should believe and what they should do. And then you have the bubble, which is a group of followers who follow that authoritarian leader. And then you have the bubble outside those two bubbles, which those are the bad people. They're the blind people. They're the people who have been deceived or just who are willfully ignorant. So Jehovah's Witness, for example, was established by Charles Taze Russell. He gave people these beliefs, these things that they should embrace, ideas about the world, and also things that you should do and shouldn't do. And then you have the bubble of people that follow him. These rules are things like don't celebrate Christmas, don't celebrate Easter. These things are pagan things. If you do this, you're involved with pagan beliefs. So, and then the bubble outside that is the people who they're not following, they're not listening, they're the blind people. They're the people that are condemned. For MAGA, of course, this is very easy to see those three bubbles that are parallel, even though it doesn't really have a religious context apart from the fact that Trump claims to be religious and that a lot of the people who follow him claim to be religious as well. But there, of course, Trump is the cult leader. There's MAGA is the group of people that follow that cult leader who believe whatever he says, not because it's reasonable, not because it's rational, not because it's evidence or there's evidence supporting those beliefs, but simply because Trump has told them to. And this is most vividly seen in the fact that he can break promises and they can just completely ignore that. Or he can say one thing on Monday, say something completely contradictory the next Monday, and they'll just roll with it. They'll just flow with it. And of course, outside this group, there's the libtards, there's the gays, the homosexuals, the trans people, the immigrants, and so on, basically who are not doing and believing what Trump tells them to, and so these are the bad people. Now, when I was religious, when I was a pastor, I used to struggle with how do I, because we still consider there were cults, just that not that I was a part of a cult, but I used to struggle. I was very much fundamentalist, very, strict, intense evangelical. So basically, I struggled with the idea of, well, how can I call these other people cults, which was very much a thing, but then not call myself a cult? I struggle with how do you differentiate? How come there's these commonalities, but I don't get caught up in being self-condemned in that? Basically, I would say there are two, like looking at it from this perspective now, there are two issues. I would say that there is the issue of making imaginary problems. When your group or your beliefs and your religious leader creates problems based on their beliefs, the beliefs of your group, which are not really a part of reality. So, for example, right now, they're dismissing due process, completely ignoring due process. Now, this has resulted in innocent people suffering, and sometimes to the point of where they've been sent to a prison, a very harsh and horrible prison in another country. If they were doing due process, this would not have occurred. So in other words, it is the belief of the cult leader, which the group is embracing, because they'll just do whatever he tells them to. If he said something different, they'd go along with that too, and they'd be completely fine with it. But because of their belief in the cult leader and what the cult leader believes, they've created a problem which is harming people and hurting people. And that is, in this case, I'm discussing the problem of not allowing due process. Now, another thing I struggled with back when I was a Christian, when I was a pastor, was this whole issue of tolerance. So think of it, you can have the biological male who's wearing a dress, who's trans, who's homosexual, and so on. My group, or groups today, would typically condemn that person. So I'd say that was in group B. Outside that, there was a group C, which was saying, no, we should just tolerate this, allow them their freedom. This is okay. Let them make their choices. People believe different things, do different things. What I would say though is at the time, I would say, well, look, you're just, instead of condemning him, you're condemning me and you're being intolerant towards me. Therefore, I considered it was an issue, a dilemma, which you couldn't really avoid. Either we condemn them or you're condemning me. Either way, someone's always being not tolerated against. So I didn't consider that that was a real objection to my beliefs because I considered it was impossible to avoid. While I left, this was one of the things that I struggled with as much as anything. And basically, I somewhat resolved it by thinking of another three bubbles, or thinking of these three bubbles and saying, well, if I give up my belief in this regard and my condemnation of this person, well, then they're able to live in freedom. And then group C doesn't have a reason to condemn me. And then, of course, I don't have a reason to condemn that person as well because I've given this up. Well, then we can have all three of these groups living in peace and harmony with each other. But if I would if I won't give up my belief in this regard, and so then let's say all the people in group C join me and we all join in condemnation of this other person, well, then they're still condemned and they still lose their freedom because of my beliefs, because of the beliefs of the other people. There is a sense, so you could carry this farther and say that you could resolve the issue from either side as far as just the issue of tolerance by itself. But the issue is there's really nothing in it apart from my religious belief, which led me to condemn these people. I could say that I had rational reasons that I thought at the time were valid in order to justify my beliefs, but once you give that up, you realize that really there was nothing beyond just my religious beliefs motivating this intolerance. In other words, creating this imaginary problem in the world, just like an even stronger example is where Trump is creating an imaginary problem, which is resulting in innocent people being condemned and mistreated and even in some cases sent to prison.